Hi, my name is Terry J. Alman, and welcome to this, my 6th ever installment of VideoFuzzy, the video. I'm recording alongside my podcast episode 77 titled A Mighty Wind. Friday night feature for this one, I am highlighting the Comedy Central presentation of 2003's A Mighty Wind, another one of Christopher Guest's screwy, partially scripted ensemble features, this time focused on folk music, archived in this collection to discs 1188 and 1189. To honor the passing of Lake folk music manager Irving Steinblum, his family invited his acts, folk music legends The Folksmen, the New Main Street Singers, and Mitch and Mickey, to the Town Hall in New York to perform their hits, remembering folk music from the 50s to the zenith of its popularity in the 60s. Bob Balaban plays Jonathan Steinblum, the very fussy, precise, persnickety son of the late Irving Steinblum, on the phone with the band within what couldn't have been hours since the funeral, to fling this gigantic stage presentation together within 2 weeks. It shouldn't be too hard. All we need is an unbooked, affordable performance space in New York City for a reunion concert of folk bands, some of whom haven't spoken to each other in decades. But the comedy doesn't focus on how haphazard this whole thing is. It's pretty much entirely on the music and its various makers. We see a barbecue reunion of the Folksmen, who all seem to be available. There was Michael McKean as Jerry Poulter singing lead, Christopher Guest as tenor Alan Barrows, and Harry Shearer as bass vocalist Mark Shub. Of the Main Street Singers, we meet the last surviving original member of that perky Newftet, George Menschel, played by Paul Dooley, who, together with 2 other members, stepped away decades ago to open an adult entertainment shop called Three Wise Men. This seemed like an odd aside, but as we are to learn, there are some directly binding ties between this particular offshoot rebranding of the Main Street Singers and its current reiteration, the new Main Street Singers, centered on Jonathan Michael Higgins and Jane Lynch as Terry and Lori Boner, both who it would be inaccurate to call them recovered victims of child abuse. Terry's isolation growing up, so enthralled by their music, he crafted them as life-sized cardboard cutouts and imagined singing and laughing together with a basement full of loving, supporting friends made out of gym boxes. Lori's experience is perhaps more disturbing, leaving her tiny hometown of Chicago at the age of 15, one of so many children she suspected no one noticed she was absent, made her way to Los Angeles, where she did some work with the Three Wise Men Studios and took some small roles in their specialty market films and gained some notoriety for her willingness to do things that others wouldn't. Oh, that's so long ago now. They got her involved in the new Main Street Singers, and she loved to sing. She met Terry, and they were married. We also meet new Main Street singer Sissy Knox, played by Parker Posey, daughter of original Main Street singer Fred Knox, and Rescue from the Streets, who demonstrates folk music to grade schoolers. Wow, is she chipper! At this point, it's sensible to wonder what life is like for the members of that cult. I mean band, the band, Psychedelic Spree. Rather, the new Fun Dot. I mean the new Main Street Scientologists. I mean singers. God, to mention back in episode 75, I mentioned, sorry about all that. Yes, the new Main Street Singers. Generally, I edit all that out. Weird. There's an unmistakable hierarchy. Everyone's a little afraid of Terry, who has perfect pitch and uses it to praise or punish the others, depending on how they perform. There's a color palette they follow down to lemon yellow eyeshadow and some rather unusual clothing choices we learn about as Lori explains their spirituality. They worship an unconventional deity which exists only in her own mind, she said, adding that in their rituals they have witnessed the awesome and vibratory power of color, and all of this could have been an excuse to get John Michael Higgins in a hot salmon V-neck sweater, but when the whole crew comes out in bright yellow outfits with cornflower yet the sweater vests, it's certainly eye-catching. They're witches in nature's colors, she said. Wink, while winking. And we got a glimpse of them in the studio in their wizard's robes with sparklers, but it's totally not some outlandish belief system, Terry Boner hastens to explain. Humankind is simply materialized color operating on the 49th vibration. I mean, you'd come to that conclusion walking down the street or going to the store. Here's where I mentioned their new manager, Fred Evan Wilford, R.I.P. you nutball. What happened? Mike LaFontaine. Oh wow, new Main Street Singers manager, they got a winner. Reminiscing about his pantsing mid-season replacement sitcom, Laugh Riot, Frosted Tip Painter's Pants. What happened? Lotka, Andy Kaufman nonsense. Oh, hey, during that tribute performance to that dead guy, here's a literary reference. Maybe have someone throw a great big bucket of water from off stage and all the ladies will be all wet with their tops and I come out and say, what happened? Everyone laughs. Yeah, just a suggestion, why not? Terry's face at the suggestion is priceless. If there were a burlap sack on set, Michael Fontaine's head would be in it, beaten with a banjo. That's why not. Literary reference. Before I explore the third act, Mitch and Mickey, there's an undercurrent of tension between the new Main Street Singers and everyone else. Mickey notes with grudging envy that they've got a steady gig in Branson, Missouri, and Michael McKean as Jerry Poulter complains of their success, that they're so commercial. It feels like sour grapes, but there's something genuinely spiteful coming up later in the show. I'll circle back. For now, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara as America's sweethearts, Mitch and Mickey, funniest damn. Their duo formed when Mickey was playing a club with her sister, and they were heckled terribly. Mitch, a folk singer himself, moved to defend their honor and was beaten and hospitalized for his trouble. Mickey came to the hospital, brought him a rose in appreciation, met him when he came to, his jaw wired shut, only able to communicate by writing notes on a notepad, she said. Some of the most beautiful poetry she'd ever read. They started singing together, Mickey said, truly the first time in her life that she sang, that she truly learned to sing with Mitch. Then they performed their hit song, Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, on Lee Aikman's Folk Hour, dated 1966. Mitch paused, leaned over, and kissed Mickey during the coda to that number, and we got Martin Berg. Paul Benedict is folk music historian Martin Berg, said the significance of that kiss, it cannot be overstated, the significance of that kiss in the history of folk music, or maybe even the history of human beings. Unfortunately, sometime in the early 70s, there was a tragic blow-up, a violent breakup, Mickey going off on Mitch, who apparently snapped and spun off into a terrifyingly dark solo career. Some time, not enough, an administrator said, in an asylum. He's clearly the weak link in the production. Bob Allen, Jonathan Steinblum, has been, since about the opening scene, on the phone with Mitch, begging him to be part of the tribute concert, and when he appears on screen, he's arrived in Albany on a Greyhound bus. Let's start there. No expense spared, huh? At least the documentary film crew knew where to find him. He, this endearingly vague thing, somehow manages to get to Mickey's lovely home, which she shares with her husband, model train enthusiast and bladder management expert Leonard Crabb. The Mitch we meet 30 years post their breakup is hard to read. It's immediately clear from her interview that Mickey has a much fonder memories of their time together than he did, that upon any reflection at all, she realizes that she's actually kind of stepped in it, that they haven't spoken in decades and for reasons, and well, there's not a lot of room for interpretation when a solo project, a cry for help, and calling it quits. The photo on the cover, the album with waist deep in a grave, included such songs as If I Had a Gun, Anyone But You, and May She Rot in Hell. He's much mellower now, Mitch, but also nebulous and vague. Really the after picture for Electroshock. There's this on-screen, off-screen thing that's happening with Mitch. Whenever we see him, generally in rehearsal, he's engaged, present, prepping for a show. Off-screen Mitch is doubtful, confused, kind of a diva. There's one point where we see Mitch in his hotel room with a guitar, alone, except for the documentarian, which it'd be fun to know what Mitch thought of that. Alone with a guitar in his no-tell motel, regretting this trip and his new best friends, the couple in the adjoining room, and the unbridled romance they got underway there. Mitch is pretty sure he remembers what's going on with that, or at least politely stops composing his new hit song, Going Home, so they can hear themselves breaking all the way through their headboard in there. Jeez. Mitch talks to Jonathan about the concern he's got that the audience will be expecting to see someone from the past
a man who no longer exists.
Damn, it's the strongest characterization in this entire movie, this broken doll of a man on the floor, but holy Christ, it all takes place out of shot. When he's working with Mickey, when he's talking to Jonathan, he's fearful but accommodating, odd but present, and totally capable of putting on a show. Every time he's determined to call it off, that he's being some kind of unreasonable diva, it's no cameras. It's kind of like that cartoon frog. No less a mystery for all we never learn exactly what it was that set Mickey storming off in a huff into the arms of a bloodless sales rep, urological supplies, and model train enthusiast Leonard Crabbe. At one point, alone with the documentarian, Mitch did cop to calming pre-show jitters via sex with random fans and hotel staff, but there's really nothing definitive there, no. So we've got the groups, the new Main Street Singers, driven professionals, never stopped working, wholesome but decidedly odd. We get the Folksmen, and they're prepping a show for, like, 1963, when people knew who they were and might indeed put up with, say, Skeletons of Quinto, a joyless deep cut featuring competing spoken word passages in English and Spanish. Mitch is still trapped inside his own head, and it's just too unavailable. The mystery unresolved. Whatever the hell happened between Mitch and Mickey, the film is content to keep us guessing. Harder to believe he'd be able to find the words or recapture energy he no longer feels across from a woman he feels has betrayed him, broken him, built a life with Leonard Crabbe, a button-down urinary fabulist, trained spotty and active embarrassment to his wife. Contrast with, as she's singing with Mitch, Mickey's face is relaxed, her smiles and laughter come easily. He's unwilling or unable to kiss her during the rehearsals together, and their sadness, this is abject. So again, flip side of the same coin, what the heck happened with Mickey that she went off on Mitch in the studio that night? She shares a realization early in the piece. I've made a terrible mistake. No, seriously, you can apply that to the last 30 years of your life. The band signed, the venue booked. Jonathan Seinblum approaches public television people in New York who are so over the friggin' moon that folk music and its dozens of fans might actually tune in. It's got Ed Begley Jr. as network president Lars Olfen verklempt. He was real musical growing up. His character, maybe we've heard of his hit Hundelige Fliegekommen, or How's It Hangin' Grandma, which, oh wow, it's huge on the Swedish charts. Him and ABBA. But we've got the deputy mayor declaring the day of the performance Folk Music Day in New York, which I'm sure all kinds of people noticed. Equipment is arriving, the stage is getting set for the production. Lars is in the production room telling the director about the importance of close-ups, and I will say that while Jonathan was fussy little detail-oriented Schnickamagosh while the stage was taking shape, and I'm not a violent person, but it leads to one of the most satisfying moments in the show. Jonathan was pestering a stage manager, Larry, about eye-level floral arrangements, and the mic stands should have mics on them, and these set pieces are flat, and are those lights up there? Are they safe? Larry's finally had enough and swats the top of Jonathan's head like a Family Feud buzzer, and it's just timing and energy, the funniest thing that could have happened. The event couldn't have had a better turnout, seriously, a packed house. Jonathan was almost acceptable as MC, but I mentioned actual spite back there. The folksmen are downstairs rehearsing their opening number, Never Did No Wandering, when they hear it coming from the overhead speaker. New Main Street Singers have taken the stage and they're doing their song. Well, yeah, so that's dark and spiteful. No friggin' way Terry and Laurie don't know that the Folksmen would be including one of their biggest hits in the set, leaving the Folksmen scrambling to ready something else to open with. What? There's no real consequence for that transgression, and that's unfortunate. I mean, they take the high road. In the moment where the new Main Street Singers are coming off, the Folksmen are going on, Terry asks Michael McKean as Jerry how they sounded. We can never tell from out there. Did we sound okay? And there's this edge to his question. Jerry blunts with, oh, we didn't hear. We were downstairs. No idea. Downstairs, listening to them, Jerry complained that they were butchering the song, and the only actual consequence is that the Folksmen skipped performing in their set. They took the stage with another Folksman standard, Old Joe's Place, and did just fine. And obviously any real conflict between those two bands and its resolution would detract from the real drama of the piece, which is Mitch wandering off during the opening act to get some air. The camera follows him outside to a small shop across the way where he's looking at postcards and being his typically unreadable self. Backstage, Mickey is frantic, wondering if anyone's seen him. No one went with him. The folksmen are finishing up their act, and Mitch is nowhere to be found. It's a live show. Jonathan tells him to stay up there, fill time. They gamely stay out there and riff, laying in a long, complicated backstory for that moody, unlistenable Spanish Civil War dirge I mentioned, the skeletons of Quinto. Meanwhile, Mickey's losing her mind. Oh my god, I knew it. He's ruined everything all over again. How selfish can anyone be? When, seriously, he steps in from just out of shot, hands her a rose. I wanted to find a good one, he says. She's silent, touched, overwhelmed, and just as the folksmen are about to bust out the skeletons, a stagehand runs out and whispers, "Get off!" And, "Good night, everyone!" Mitch and Mickey step out and perform A Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, and both groups run upstairs, gather in the wings to watch, taking bets on will they or won't they. The performance is beautiful, heartfelt. Audience members are welling up listening to it, and as the fateful moment arrives, Mickey looks up. Mitch leans over, gives her a tender kiss. Oh wow, what a release, this kiss, whose importance to now human civilization and the laws of thermodynamics themselves it would be impossible to overstate. Wild applause. On into the final number, the title song of the piece, A Mighty Wind. This is something of a surprise because we never hear any of the groups rehearsing it, which that showed enormous restraint on the part of these, yes, fictional documentarians. The fun we'd have in witnessing unreadiness transform over the course of 2 weeks into a full production. Despite difficulty in reading Mitch throughout, and the disappointing lack of confrontation between the new Main Street singers and actually wronged parties like the Folksmen, this song pulls everything in we've watched for the past hour or so into a lovely tribute to their late manager. A mighty wind is blowing, it's kicking up the sand, it's blowing out a message to every woman, child, and man. Yes, a mighty wind's a-blowing, cross the land and cross the sea. It's blowing peace and freedom, it's blowing equality. Yes, and it's blowing you and me, which now I really cannot hear the break like the wind from this Spinal Tap, another Christopher Guest production, or really not much variation from Old Joe's Place, but whatever, it's a great finale, framed by some clips from Where They Are Now. What happened? Yes, Fred, pitching primetime television production starring a folk troupe from the 70s. I mean, of course. And Mickey's crafting dour bladder management dirges for urine cons. She's a musician again. Well, I mean, you hear it in her voice, and we see it in her face, how thrilling it is, this life she has with Leonard Crabbe, model train splainer and penis clamp shill extraordinaire. Had to be confusing for the editors because Mitch is writing again, and elusive as lucidity tends to be for this man, seems to understand that the show was just that, a show, theatrics. Mickey said her sister in the audience took it for real, that Mickey'd been leading him on. She insisted no, she was not. She's never been more fulfilled, but of the two of them, Mitch seems to be the more genuinely happy. And after repeatedly dismissing the new Main Street singers as commercial sellouts, the Folksmen were touring again. We see them playing a casino somewhere, a bit of a shift in the lineup, as Harry Shearer's Mark Shub started living her truth, identifying as female, though I didn't catch her name. Fully supported by her fellow folksmen, she seemed genuinely happy, having shaved her beard and added a blonde wig and dressed in something off a couch. She still sings alto profundo, and the group, now looking like nothing so much as Peter, Paul, and Mary. A fun show. I had some comments on the songs, but it's worth tracking the show down and enjoying them directly. IMDb said the troupe took the Grammy for Best Song Written for a Screenplay, title work Mighty Wind, and Kiss at the End of the Rainbow was up for an Oscar. I'll just say it's really easy to see whose work is being spoofed by each of these acts, but while the songs were parody encapsulations of the energy of the day as specific groups and songs, they're pretty good songs and performances unto themselves. I mean, I had no trouble seeing how these acts would have had a following, which again, I think contributed to the comedy. Yes, they're a little precious. Yes, folk music gave voice to those protesting injustice, war, and segregation, but some hard-to-ignore, smug, self-important detachment, saturated in humility, and kind of impossible to ignore a general lack of representation reflected in, well, most of this cast. Reference-wise, Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant is about the war and the draft. Old Joe's Place is not. Well, there's a puppy in the parlor and a skillet on the stove and a smelly old blanket that an elf wove. There's chicken on the table, but you gotta say grace. There's always something cooking at Old Joe's Place. It's clever patter, it's engaging, as good poetry should, brings in all the senses, though say this, the cleanliness of the blanket likely has more to do with the puppy than whoever made it, but whatever. The weirdness actually begins with the opening line. Whenever I'm out a-wandering, chasing a rainbow dream, I often stop and think about a place I've never seen. And the one that really caught my ear was Never Did No Wandering, which gives the lie to Old Joe's opening lyric, but we got my mother was the cold north wind. My father was the son of a railroad man from the west of hell, where the trains don't even run. And the whole rest of the song was random, never have I ever word association about traveling the singer has never done, which, while evocative, falls a little. The real fun here was the 2 solid weeks of rehearsals, culminating in the new Main Street Singers taking the stage ahead of them and infringing on their copyright on live television. They're yeah, piggybacking on the oceanic satellite signal there into national television. I suppose it's a thing that has happened, homage, tributes, sincerest form of flattery and all that. Weird, given how organized Jonathan Steinblum, how concerned he is about set pieces and mic stands, that what the bands were planning on performing he just left to chance. The big group sing at the end. Some of these people haven't been on stage together in decades. One of them, there's no guarantee he was going to be on stage at all, but yeah, they'll just figure that out. And while I'd say the film is a perfectly good showcase for most of the songs, and plenty good enough for most, the one that stomps unforgivably is the new Main Street Singers' Potatoes in the Paddy Wagon, which one of those great mid-century storytellers. I found a performance cut on YouTube. I'll put the link to it down there. It looks to be a home-recorded DVD extra. I also appreciated the performance cut to A Kiss into the End of the Rainbow, which let the song be its own thing rather than a plot point. I'll put a link down there as well. Um, and there are just so many delightful cross connections to point to in A Mighty Wind, not least of which Jane Lynch and Jonathan Michael Higgins. Harry Shearer, obviously, solid ties to The Simpsons. Jane and Glee, I just found where I'd archived the pilot episode to that romp not too long ago. Along with his appearance in Community, Ralph and I got Jonathan Michael Higgins on our screens all the time with the Game Show Network production of America Says. I've enjoyed every one of these Christopher Guest productions I've encountered. This is Spinal Tap, Waiting for Guffman, Mighty Wind, Best in Show, for your consideration. All of these are so much fun, but for Mighty Wind, easy track to my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge. No one's more than a step away via Ed Begley Jr.'s involvement in 6 Feet Under. But I wanted to highlight Michael McKean for my golden thread this time. Well, there's a few reasons I'll get into here, but because I became aware of him in one of the Happy Days dozens of spin-offs, Laverne and Shirley, and thinking about it, between Lenny and Squiggy and then Schneider on One Day at a Time, just kind of normalized strange men invading women's spaces uninvited. They'd burst in without knocking, and the canned laughter would go nuts because it's hilarious, and the contribution to rape culture is as incalculable as it is troubling. But back to me scrolling through IMDb for shows that I watched and also appearances throughout my collection. Michael McKean, totally watched him. Here is Lenny and Laverne and Shirley. I'm pretty sure I have This is Spinal Tap in my collection somewhere. No, got Clue in my current collection. He was in Jumpin' Jack Flash. He was in Coneheads. It's in here somewhere. Wow, he makes a lot of appearances as David St. Hubbins. I friggin' loved him as cheeky band director Rick Rochester in Radioland Murders, and he was Cece's brother in the third season episode of The Nanny. Then appearances I almost certainly caught in Friends and Star Trek Voyager and Carolyn in the City, maybe The X-Files. Probably saw him with Bob Odenkirk in Mr. Show. Certainly saw him in Best in Show, and that's probably in here somewhere. Just spent 20 minutes talking about A Mighty Wind. Just, wow, funniest damn. Martin Short's primetime Glick band director and harpist extraordinaire Adrian Van Voorhees. Just that whole production, seriously, cannot wait for that to come into view. He was in Boston Legal, he was in the Producers remake I've got For Your Consideration here somewhere, he was in Castle, he was in Happy Endings, he made my current collection as Doug Forsett in The Good Place, and again with Bob Odenkirk and Better Call Saul as Charles McGill. Just built a breathtaking character on that show. And throughout his career, he's done a lot of voice work, whether I encountered it or not. Certainly watched Harvey Birdman, an Attorney at Law, Family Guy, American Dad, Rugrats. He had a long and brilliant career playing about 3 characters. No, that's not a fair assessment at all. You get Michael McKean in the character, you keep him there long enough, you will be shown a complete person. He'll bring depth to any story. I actually found myself examining my memories of his work on Primetime Click and the character he created for that show. Wouldn't have had to be anything at all, but there's depth there. Same with Rick Rochester. I mean, he finds a story and a way to tell it, which certainly contributed to a long and successful career. Love him wherever I see him. Normally I add fond reflections at this point, so I'll include one here. Bidding farewell to the other half of Lydia and Squiggy, David L. Lander, who passed in 2020. I'll admit that this cataloging effort was the first I'd thought of in years, his turning up as he did on disc 1197, the scrap of The Simpsons season 14 episode Helter Shelter, talking in his sleep. I learned from my search on IMDb that he died last December. I do not know how much David L. Lander I have in my collection, but in exploring the question, I found an appearance in Val's Apartment, a third season episode of The Nanny, which was a lot of fun. I wanted to thank my husband again for buying me the complete box set. I was able to pull up the episode and watch it. Nanny finds friend Val wants to get her own apartment, but rents are insane, so they go halvesies on what turns out to be a garden-level apartment similar in all ways to that of Laverne and Shirley, except for it's in Queens and not Milwaukee. That detailed firmly to the shut up, they enter an uncertain rendering of the girl's schlemiel schlemazel chant, and there's a bit of pantsing about when, with a sweep of left print smoking jacket, the landlord enters, unannounced, with his trademark, "Hello!" Val had been so excited by all the single men in the building, and turns out that's by design. They're all gay. The appearance outed an alternate reality Lenny and Squiggy, with him sharing the landlording duties with his significant other, Leonard. And as of 1995, they'd been together for 17 years, so that's just math. Just 3 episodes before, Michael McKean had appeared as Cece's brother Noel. Noel won a bet with Cece by getting Fran on an episode of Jeopardy, which... my heart. Alex Trebek, my very warmest wishes to Mayim and Ken for stepping in for the rest of 2021, and hashtag Picklavar. But the proximity of those episodes naturally got me wondering if that's when we reached out to David L. Lander to do a Fran and Val homage to Laverne and Shirley. David swishing into their new apartment. No person watching this show would miss the reference, but the fact that the 2 guests appeared within a month of each other, and how the episode felt more than usually flung together. Drescher has said that she modeled her approach to The Nanny on Lucille Ball's I Love Lucy, and has made a point of celebrating past sitcoms. Director for both episodes, and indeed for 70 others, were Dorothy Lyman, who played the completely out-of-hand Naomi on Mama's Family. There are lots of touching off points drawn in the making of this homage. The landlord never gave his name, he hardly needed to. Just thank you for that blast from the past, and stop bursting into tenants' homes unannounced. And that'll do for the 6th ever installment of VideoFuzzy, the video. I know I've enjoyed putting these together. I hope you'll check out VideoFuzzy, the podcast, the link to that at the end here, especially episode 77, A Mighty Wind, for the complete installment, or check them all out on YouTube. Follow, like, or subscribe to get the latest. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Hammond. Happy viewing!